Success! Oh, hi. Glad you're here. I'm glad to be with you. Today I'm going to talk about 2016 and the most impactful films released that year on my life. Last video I was like, the lists are short now, so this will be quick, and then I just spent 15 minutes rambling about the last movie, so yeah, we'll see how this goes. But talk about connective tissue, let's start with, should we start with that? We are now. Rogue One. Rogue One. Great movie. Fantastic film. Loved it when I saw it. Full of great shots. One of the greatest third acts in Star Wars cinema. Amazing. And that's not even including the Darth Vader. Ooh, cool. Look what he did. Cool. Yes, that scene's cool and all. That scene was spoiled for me. Like, I saw a little leaked footage like the day before I saw the freaking movie. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess Darth Vader's in the movie. And he's going to mess some guys up in a hallway. But I don't like Darth Vader, so it's a cool scene and all. But anyway, but it was cool. It was cool because I remember taking my son to it. I remember then taking my brothers and my parents, my whole family ended up seeing that movie in theaters. It was a grand old time. Great film. Great film, Rogue One. I'll never forget because it came out in December, and of course all the promotion and the marketing and the merchandise. Action figures galore. And I'll never forget watching the movie, because I went into that movie thinking, first of all, the argument where people are like, well, we know they're gonna die because they're not in the other ones. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Lots of people aren't in stories. That doesn't mean they're dead. They're just not in the story. They're off somewhere else doing something else. So every time someone's like, well, they're not in the other one, so you're an idiot. Okay? They're off doing something else. Alright? Not everyone I've ever met is in every one of my stories. It doesn't mean they're dead. Anyways, but I assumed going into this movie that they would, like, have to run away or something and hide. I was like, Disney's never gonna, like, kill them all off or anything. Spoiler alert. I was pleasantly surprised and absolutely shocked when Disney greenlit them killing all of the main characters. And then after seeing the film, I remember thinking, because it came out right before Christmas, I remember thinking of all the kids that probably had all the action figures and Lego sets and all kinds of toys of these characters from this film under their Christmas tree. And they're dead. And the way they all die one by one, exactly after they complete, it's like a chain of events. This guy does exactly what they need him to do to move on to the next phase, dead. Then this guy does exactly what they need him to do, move on to the next phase, dead. So on and so forth. Starting with K-2SO. Represent. K-2SO is the first one to go out, but the fact that they killed them all still blows my mind. And it's one of the reasons I love that movie so much, because it has cojones. And it's also a great film. Bringing back the little, little snippets from episode 4 so we can have the actual pilots from A New Hope. And then, of course, you have Red 5, who gets killed. And then they're like, Luke can be Red 5. He just died in the Battle of... What was it? Beach Planet? I don't know. Anyway, Rogue One, great film. 10 Cloverfield Lane. I remember the promotion for that. It blew our minds. We had no idea they were going to make anything that had anything to do with the deal. And then we thought maybe it's just a studio thing because J.J. Abrams is, like, oh, they could just be calling it 10 Cloverfield Lane. Like they're going to have like a series of movies with Cloverfield in the title, but it's not really connected to the movie Cloverfield. Because this one is, oh my gosh, Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Oh my gosh, Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I love her. I love her. She's in Star Wars. Talk about more connective tissue. But I saw 10 Cloverfield Lane. And of course, the moral of the story being, spoiler alert, being that humans are monsters too. And that, gosh, what's his name? See? That's why I'm making these. My memories are going. Dude from The Big Lebowski. You know who I'm talking about. Goodman. Dan Goodman? Goodman. Goodman. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, he's fantastic in that film. John Goodman. Oh, thank you. And then the ending, the big twist at the end is yes, it is connected to 10 Cloverfield Lane, and this is like the alien invasion. It's like a sequel because the one thing was just a big monster, and now it's like an alien invasion, and then of course you have the other one, the Paradox one, that came out on Netflix, and then that one is all about that one's very like a Half-Life. But anyway, 10 Cloverfield Lane is an amazing film filled with amazing performances. Mary Elizabeth Winstead and John Goodman are amazing in it, and I love that movie, and it blew my mind when I was like, oh snap, it really is aliens. Passengers, love the movie Passengers. I remember seeing it in theaters, and I just absolutely loved it. I was, this is before Chris Pratt was Chris Pratt. He was still like niche. He was still like, ooh, it's that guy from Parks and Rec. And then, of course, also back then when Jennifer Lawrence was more of a commodity, like, ooh, it's Jennifer Lawrence, and now it's like, it's Jennifer Lawrence. But Passengers, I just love the philosophical questions it would raise and the concept of oh my gosh, this guy just woke her up and destroyed her life, which he did. It's the most horrible thing anyone could do. I have a crush on this lady, and I'm lonely, so I'm going to wake her up. That is so messed up. And I remember one day my son saw the film. I think it was his mother or something. He's like, I really like that movie, Dad. And we watched it. Like, he loves that movie. I love this movie. I think Passengers is a great film. But it's so important, the philosophical questions it raises, that we should be discussing. Because, yeah. Passengers. But don't do that. Don't destroy people's lives just because you're lonely. Are you kidding me? I would be in heaven if I was on that ship all by myself. I don't care if my pod malfunctioned and I was gonna die on that thing alone. Shoot. Loneliness. Please. The need for companionship is a weakness that can be overcome. People are pathetic. Patriots Day. I have to bring up Patriots Day because it was a great depiction of the events that unfolded in that tragic bombing at the Boston Marathon. And I lived through that. Well, not lived through it. Forgive me. But I will never forget waking up that morning with a 3-year-old and then turning on the TV with the breaking news. It was like shortly after it happened. And being reminded of the horrid, despicable, disgusting world I brought that child into. You know, I've discussed that before when talking about Seven, but it was just devastating. And I remember following the news all that day while they tried to find these guys that did this, and they did. They found them. Spoiler alert. But the depiction of exactly all the details and events of leading up to, through, and how they found those guys, and the shootout and this and that in the film Patriots Day is really remarkable. It's a great film. And then that was one of the first times, because Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross were doing music for David Fincher, so they still only had 2 or 3 under their belt, but it was just for him. This was the first time, I believe, that they stepped out of that and did music for just another random movie for Brad Bird. And it's a great soundtrack for Patriots Day. And now, of course, they do all kinds of music, and they're 2-time Academy Award winners. But Patriots Day is a great depiction of the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing. So if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. Star Trek Beyond. I said before that I'm a fan of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek trilogy. He didn't do the third one, did he? Because he had to go back and do Star Wars, right? Something like that? I don't know. Anyway, he did the first 2, but he didn't direct the third one, I think. Yeah, I think that's right. But I like all 3. I mean, they kind of, I like the first one the best, and I like the second one better than the third one, but I still like them all, and I like the third one. But I have to mention it because in the trailers, and then, obviously in the film, I love the destruction of the ship, the way the crew gets separated, and they had, I like all that. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I liked the story of that movie, and who doesn't love the Beastie Boys? But there's a line by Carl Urban as Dr. McCoy When him and Spock, like that's the best pairing. The fact that him and Spock are alone together, separated from the others, was an absolutely phenomenal dynamic. But there's a particular line. What does Spock say? He says something like the fear of death is irrelevant or something like that. Or the fear of death is a weakness. Something like that. But Dr. McCoy's response is something that has stuck with me every day for my entire life because it's so true. And he says it's the fear of death that keeps us alive. If you run around thinking, you're going to live forever like some kind of stupid teenager, we've all been there, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like stunts and whatnot, like you're Tom Cruise or something. Yeah, you're asking for it. You're going to die. But when you fear death, when you avoid dangerous situations, that'll keep you alive. Self-preservation. So that line always stuck with me and changed me. It's embedded in here. That movie, sure. But that line is permanently a part of me now. It's the fear of death that keeps us alive. Very human. Arrival. I will never forget seeing Arrival in the theater. And that movie blew my freaking mind. I saw it with my brother, who's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, not the brightest star in the sky. So, it all went over his head. He had no idea what the heck was going on in the end, and I had to explain it all to him because it's pretty simple and they spell it out for you. But I thought that the ending to that movie is absolutely brilliant. And again, based on a book. I was talking to someone yesterday how, all of Denis Villeneuve's stuff seems to be based on something, mainly books, which is fascinating. He's just apparently the best at adapting certain, adaptation. He can go, ooh, this book is really cool, and have a vision in his mind after reading it, and then make some of the most brilliant masterpieces on the face of the planet. So good for him. But I think Arrival was the first time I really was like, okay, this guy, whoever directed this movie, this is something special. And then he went on and did Blade Runner, which I didn't like. I liked it technically, I just didn't like it story-wise. But that luckily got him the job to make a little two-part film called Dune, which I am predicting we will get a third film. I think Dune Part 2 is going to be the third highest grossing film of the year. That is my prediction. I think it's going to be a big hit, and I think Denis Villeneuve is going to get to combine books 2 and 3, like he wants to, into one more film, and we'll have a wonderful, perfectly complete Dune trilogy. That's my prediction. But Arrival really showed me, wow, this guy, that story, just the language and the lettering of the aliens' words. And that ending, what a great film. What a great film. Jeremy Renner, oh my gosh, at his best. Even speaking of Road One, even Forrest Whitaker, yeah, he's fantastic. What is it? Amy Adams? Yeah, what a great movie. What a great movie. I love Arrival. I could watch Arrival every day for the rest of my life and I would be happy. 31. Speaking of movies that probably that wouldn't apply to. Okay, so Rob Zombie's one of my favorite directors. It's true. I think House of a Thousand Corpses is brilliant. I think The Devil's Rejects is brilliant. I think Three from Hell is pretty good. And all of his movies are at least pretty good, if not brilliant. There's maybe one that I don't like, which is Lords of Salem. But 31 is one of those here, I just made a movie. And it's just people getting kidnapped. And it has a lot of similarities, actually, to House of a Thousand Corpses. But people getting kidnapped, and then it's Halloween, and they play this game where rich people make bets. And let's see how long they survive. But the characters of the killers themselves, especially the little guy, they're absolutely phenomenal. It's so memorable, so hilarious, so engaging, so immersive, so entertaining. 31 is kind of an underrated, as far as Rob Zombie's lower tier. Excuse me. It's nothing I would write home about, but it was very enjoyable. And the ending, I believe, spoiler alert, when she falls asleep in the little house and thinks she's made it, and that's also my introduction to that brilliant actor, what was his name? Like Murderface or something? But the main guy. She's trying to get away from him, and he's like, oh, and she's like, oh, like I won, and then he's like, I'm gonna kill you anyway. But and he's amazing in everything else. Yeah, I've seen him in since. Um, but I believe when she falls asleep in that house, and then she wakes up and she's walking on the road, and he finds her, and then supposedly kills her. I think she died, or that's a dream sequence. I think that's a dream sequence, and she's asleep. Mainly because the song playing is Dream On. So the end of the ending of that film, I don't think is reality. Okay, and last but not least, let's not talk about this film for 15 minutes, but Captain America Civil War. Everyone raves about Winter Soldier. Yeah, Winter Soldier's great, whatever. But Captain America Civil War, to me, like, I remember getting so hyped for that film, and I got to take my son. My son and I saw it together. He was 3? Really? No. 4. He was 4. And we had such a blast watching that movie. But we were so excited because it was one of those, it was probably the last major instance which things have dramatically changed in the way they market now, where movies won't tell them anything, and then it takes 2 years for us to get a Spider-Man No Way Home set. But at the time, Lego released the airport battle scene Lego set, which, you know, was in the trailers. No big deal. Nothing, no big spoiler there, except for the fact that it came with a giant man. I wish that I didn't have that spoiled. I wish I would have been surprised during the movie that Ant-Man, who was my favorite MCU character, I wish I would have been surprised in the movie that he went into Giant Man. Like, I knew that was coming eventually. I just didn't think it was going to come so suddenly, like his second appearance. But what an amazing sequence. What an amazing film. That's like one of my all-time favorite MCU films still to date. I think it's like top 3 or something. But the Russo brothers, their directing blows my mind because not only is that one of the best MCU films, one of the best comic book films if you ask me, one of the best superhero films if you ask me, but that sequence in particular, the airport battle, if you will, is probably, in my opinion, one of, if not the greatest action set piece in the history of film. The characters, the quips, the action, the choreography, the story that's happening during all of the, like, the airport battle in Captain America Civil War is one of the greatest achievements in cinema history, if you ask me. And this was done by the Russo brothers, who at the time, for me, sure they did Winter Soldier, whatever. But for me, I knew them from something else. Yes, they came from Community, never watched that show, but they also came from Arrested Development, one of the greatest comedy television shows of all time, by far. And they also made one of my favorite comedy films of all time, one that most people haven't even heard of. It's called Welcome to Collinwood, with Sam Rockwell and an all-star cast, William H. Macy, yada, yada, yada. A phenomenal film. A phenomenal comedy. Idiots trying to do a caper that goes awry. Like, I love that movie. Welcome to Collinwood is an amazing film. Last I checked, it's free on YouTube. If you haven't seen Welcome to Collinwood, and you're a fan of comedy, or Sam Rockwell, or the Russo brothers, watch that immediately. You're welcome. That movie is a classic and should be far more known than it is, especially now that they went on to make one of the highest grossing films of all time after Infinity War and Endgame. So the fact that the Russo brothers have such a broad spectrum, whether it's comedy, action, drama, television, film, and all of those things are some of the greatest things we've ever gotten, blows my freaking mind. So Captain America Civil War, for the reasons that I got to take my son, we had a blast. We got that Lego set with the Giant Man and the first little Ant-Man. I mean, I'm not going to bust them out, but I still got my Giant Man built. the action sequence in the airport, and the Russo brothers having come from such great comedy chops. And I've noticed that's why they're some of the best. That's why they did Infinity War, Endgame, Civil War, because they have mastered handling a dozen or more characters perfectly, equally, in an ensemble. Because Community, that's exactly what that is. Arrested Development, that's exactly what that is. Welcome to Collinwood, it's an ensemble, all-star, A-list cast. So, yeah. Yeah, Captain America Civil War was definitely the most impactful for me of 2016. I think that's it. I gotta go get some orange slices. Okie dokie.